It is necessary to speak plainly and be explicitly clear about what your values are, what is not okay. Racism is never okay by the media, and we've talked about that, and they need to really check themselves and do a better job and be better prepared to cover this league in the way that it deserves. From the racism that the South Carolina team has experienced in the last 3-4 years, that's been very explicit and, sort of in the consciousness.
You know what's crazy? One little eye poke in a WNBA game, and now we're talking about racism, media bias, and even soccer stars are getting involved. Megan Rapinoe just called out a reporter, and it's making waves across all of women's sports. This story's got more twists than a pretzel. Imagine this. Dijonai Carrington accidentally pokes Caitlin Clark in the eye during a playoff game.
Caitlin Clark, which should have been just an unbelievably exciting time where everyone can just celebrate the explosion of women's basketball into a whole new stratosphere. A few weeks ago, where she basically implied that the racial tension is good for business and invoking Magic and Bird. It's not good for business. It's never good for business. Basically to protect and shepherd the league, both from a business perspective, from a player welfare perspective, from a health and safety perspective, and from a growth and investment perspective.
No big deal, right? Wrong. It's like someone lit a match in a room full of fireworks. Suddenly everyone's talking about racism in sports media. Even Megan Rapinoe, the soccer superstar, jumps in. It's wild. You think you've seen drama? This story's about to show you what real drama looks like. We're talking about a single moment that's got everyone from players to reporters to fans all fired up. And trust me, after this, you'll never look at sports coverage the same way again. It's time to break down what's really going on behind the scenes in women's sports. You ready? Alright, time to peel back the curtain on sports media. You think reporters just ask innocent questions? Think again. Megan Rapinoe's latest comments are exposing a hidden bias that's been lurking in plain sight. How deep does this rabbit hole go? Picture this. A USA Today journalist asks a question about the eye poke incident, and suddenly Megan Rapinoe's fired up. But why? What could be so bad about a simple question? Well, hold on to your seats, because Rapinoe's about to school us all on the subtle ways racism sneaks into sports coverage. So here's what went down. Christine Brennan from USA Today asks about the eye poke and Rapinoe's reaction. It's like someone just lit a fuse. She doesn't mince words, saying, "That doesn't feel good. That feels racist, to be honest."
Reality in the W this year, where players aren't feeling safe online or in real life. There are people coming to basketball games that have make basketball great again. Environment where players don't feel safe. And also back to the player responsibility, and where does the responsibility for all of this lie? Well, I don't think it's just the media that has failed. I do think the players have been failed this year. They have not been failed by their Players Association and Terry Jackson.
Or themselves.
Whoa, right? But wait, there's more. Rapinoe's not just talking about this one incident. She's pointing out a whole pattern in sports media that most of us probably never even noticed. She says there's this tendency to protect white players while going after black players. It's like two different rule books for how athletes get treated in the press. You're probably thinking, no way, that can't be true. But Rapinoe's not backing down. She's calling out the media's natural instinct to protect and narrate white players versus go after and narrate black players. It's a pretty heavy accusation, and it's got people talking. But here's where it gets really interesting. Rapinoe and Sue Bird, another sports legend, start breaking down the actual physics of an eye poke. They're saying the square footage of Caitlin's eyeball is very small. It's like they're using science to show how ridiculous the whole situation is. So what's the big deal? Why is Rapinoe making such a fuss? Well, she's shining a spotlight on something that's been hiding in plain sight. It's not just about one question or one incident. It's about the whole way sports media operates, often without even realizing it. Think about it. How many times have you read a sports article or watched a game and never questioned the way players are described? Rapinoe's saying we need to wake up and pay attention to these subtle biases that shape how we see athletes. This isn't just about the WNBA or women's sports. It's about the whole sports world and how we talk about athletes of different races. Rapinoe's comments are like a wake-up call, making us question everything we thought we knew about sports coverage. And you know what's really wild? This all started with one little eye poke in a basketball game.
Racism has been impacting the WNBA well before this year. This is not a new thing. Sure. This is, and in that way, I do think Caitlin's being used as a pawn. I would almost joke. I'd be like, I would have loved to have shut up and dribble. Mm-hmm. In so many ways, I would have loved to have been valued. We understood that in order to push our league forward, we were going to have to combat these things. And then you know what else we learned? It feels good to stand up for yourself.
Who would have thought it would lead to such a big conversation about race and media bias? But that's the power of sports. Sometimes it's not just about what happens on the court or field. It's about the bigger issues that affect all of us. You might think this controversy would fade away, but it's only getting started. The WNBA players just dropped a bombshell that's shaking up the sports world. How far are they willing to go to protect their own? The players aren't sitting back and taking it. They're coming together like never before, and it's all because of one reporter's question. The WNBA Players Union is firing back, and they're not pulling any punches. So what's got them so fired up? It's all about that question Christine Brennan asked Dejanai Carrington. The union says it wasn't just a bad question, it was downright dangerous. They're saying Brennan was trying to bait Carrington into a story that would fuel racist and misogynistic hate online. That's a pretty serious accusation, right? But the union's not stopping there. They're calling out USA Today, saying Brennan abused her position as a journalist. They want accountability, and they're not afraid to demand it. It's like watching a team huddle up before a big play, but this time, the game's happening off the court. Now, you'd think Brennan would back down after all this heat, right? Wrong. She's standing her ground, saying her question was totally fair. She even said she'd ask it again if she had the chance.
You know, in some ways, it started with me and Diana in our show getting interviewed by Scott Van Pelt, and Diana having, her response, which if you go back and watch it, and I don't mean to split hairs here, Diana has been so complimentary of Caitlin since, which to me just really speaks to the issue, which is at times people have been negative towards some of these rookies, right? What you see in men's sports at times, and I'll use examples like Dylan Brooks and Draymond Green, and it's not to call them out in any specific way other than they've had moments with players. And yet when they do something, it's not the entire league hates the player.
Talk about doubling down. This whole situation is like a spotlight on the tug of war between players and the media. It's not just about one question or one incident anymore. It's about how athletes are portrayed, especially when it comes to race.
But it is just another moment where things get taken onto social media and they just grow and people spew, and it turns into something that you can't even recognize within 24 hours. They have been critical from a basketball standpoint, and yet those statements have been just blanket statements on how an entire group of people feel. It led to the Twitter trolls and bots taking over. And what started there was this narrative of petty, jealous players hating on Caitlin. Mm-hmm. I cannot stress enough how insulting that is. That is probably like potentially the biggest insult you could throw at an athlete.
The players are saying enough is enough. They want fair coverage, and they're not afraid to fight for it. You know what's really wild? This isn't just about the WNBA. It's sparking conversations about race and representation across all of women's sports. Players are speaking up, demanding better from journalists, and even calling on the league to step up. It's like watching a game where the rules are changing mid-play. The players are rewriting the playbook on how they interact with the media. They're not just athletes anymore. They're becoming advocates for themselves and each other. Think about it. When was the last time you saw an entire league of players come together like this? It's not just about protecting one player. It's about changing the whole system. They're saying if you come for one of us, you come for all of us.
We as WNBA players were having basketball conversations, and everybody just took it to another place where we were attacking them as people. Mm-hmm. That's really what happened. That's where it started, that we must just dislike her, that we look at her side-eyed, that we don't want her to come in the WNBA and be successful, that we're hating on her. And college basketball is a very tricky evaluator of talent. There have been players that have had amazing college careers, only to get to the WNBA as top picks and struggle. When people were up in arms about Caitlin getting picked up full court, and we talked about this early in one of our podcasts, it was like, well, yeah, you have to. If you don't, she's going to drop 35 on you. Yeah. It's called like smart defense.
And here's the kicker, and this could change everything about how we cover women's sports. Journalists might have to think twice before asking certain questions. Leagues might have to step up and protect their players more. It's like we're watching the birth of a new era in sports media. But here's the big question. Will it work? Can the players really change how they're portrayed in the media? Or is this just going to create more tension between athletes and journalists? One thing's for sure, the WNBA players aren't backing down. They're showing us what unity looks like, and they're proving that sometimes the biggest plays happen off the court. This isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about respect, fairness, and changing the game for good. You thought this was just about a single eye poke? Think again. Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird are about to blow the lid off something much bigger.
Then, when the season started and people saw people blocking Caitlin's shot or picking her up full court, it then became, oh, they're targeting her. Oh, they're trying to hurt her.
Exactly.
This is basketball.
Yeah.
But again, what happened was all of these narratives got birthed through Twitter trolls. And I will shout out Caitlin for making that point. Like, these aren't fans, these are trolls. I did not come out of college with the same amount of fanfare as Caitlin. I did not come out of college with the same level of popularity, scrutiny, all of it. Nobody has.
They're not just talking about one incident, they're exposing a whole system of racism in women's basketball that's been hiding in plain sight for years. Rapinoe's not holding back. She's calling out the WNBA for failing its players, especially when it comes to dealing with racism. She's saying the league and Commissioner Kathy Engelbert have dropped the ball big time. Can you believe it? The face of women's soccer is now taking on women's basketball's biggest issues. Let's break it down. Rapinoe's saying the WNBA has greatly failed its players this year. That's huge. She's not just talking about one bad call or one heated moment. She's pointing out a whole pattern of the league not stepping up when it comes to racism. But here's where it gets even crazier. This isn't just about what's happening right now. Rapinoe's saying this racism stuff has been going on for way longer than just this season. It's not new, and it's not just about Caitlin Clark or any one player. It's a problem that's been simmering under the surface for years. Now, you've probably heard about the rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, right? Well, Rapinoe's saying that whole situation is just the tip of the iceberg. There's been all this talk about racial tensions, with some people saying Clark's fans have been racist towards black players. It's like a powder keg, and Rapinoe just lit the match. But Rapinoe and Sue Bird aren't just complaining, they're calling for action. They want the league and the media to step up and do better. They're saying we need to change how we talk about players, how we cover games, and how we deal with racism in sports. Think about it, how many times have you watched a game and never thought twice about how the commentators describe different players? Rapinoe's saying we need to wake up and pay attention to these subtle biases that shape how we see athletes. This is bigger than just basketball. It's about how we treat athletes of different races across all sports. Rapinoe's comments are like a wake-up call, making us question everything we thought we knew about sports coverage. And you know what's wild? This all started with one little eye poke in a playoff game. Who would have thought it would lead to such a big conversation about race and media bias? But that's the power of sports. Sometimes it's not just about what happens on the court. It's about the bigger issues that affect all of us. So what happens now? Will the WNBA step up and address these issues? Will we see changes in how games are covered and how players are treated? Or is this just going to be another moment that fades away without real change?
So the season starts, I watch the games. Not at any point did I think anybody was playing dirty against Caitlin. Not at any point did I think Caitlin was targeted. And the play is physical, which it always is. I watched pretty much every single one of Caitlin's games early on because I am a fan. I do like good basketball. And of course, I wanted to see how she would do. Something I'll just add to that since we're on the topic. You know what the issue is in this moment? Here's the issue. As WNBA players, we know the level of competition that's in the WNBA. And we also know the level of competition that's in college.
One thing's for sure. Rapinoe and Bird aren't backing down. They're using their platforms to shine a light on these issues, and they're challenging all of us to do better. It's not just about watching the game anymore. It's about understanding the bigger picture and being part of the change. This eye poke didn't just hurt Caitlin Clark, it's opened our eyes to the racism lurking in sports media. Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird aren't just talking about one incident, they're exposing a whole system that's been hiding in plain sight for years. You know what's crazy? This could change everything about how we cover women's sports. Journalists might have to think twice before asking certain questions. Leagues might have to step up and protect their players more, but here's the real game changer. It's up to us now. We need to watch sports differently, question how players are described, and support fair coverage for all athletes. The real game isn't just on the court anymore, it's in how we talk about it, and that's a game we all need to play.